Welcome back to the shop. As you saw in the shop tour video that I did a couple weeks ago, I picked up this new to me unisaw to replace the old contractor saw, and one of the features that I really wanted on this saw was a left tilting blade. The problem with this is now none of my jigs and sleds actually work with the blade because it's not in the same location as the old one. I have a customer that's requested some boxes to be built, and I wanted to get a new miter sled so we can do the 45-degree bevels on everything. So we're going to start with that. And the first thing I need to do is glue up some parts for the fence. So let's get started on that. For the fence, I'm just going to glue 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood together for roughly 1.5 inches thickness, and then go somewhere around 2 3/4 inches tall for my height. All right, so my sled's going to be roughly 24 inches wide. I found this piece of scrap that was left over that's a little under 48, so I can cut it in half, make 2 fences out of it. I'm actually going to glue this and clamp it to my level just to give it a little better chance of being straight when I'm done. Sometimes I've clamped things up like this and you end up with just a little bit of a curve to it, and it doesn't really work well for a fence. So get some glue on these and clamp them up, and then we'll get back onto the sled. All right, before we go any further, let's talk about the hardware we're going to use. I picked up a couple of these runners. Same thing I used on the big Crosscut sled, just a shorter version of it. Still has all the adjustments and the piece here on the end to key into your T-track so the board doesn't lift up on you. For hold down, I'm going to try something a little bit different than what I normally do. I've got this dovetail system. The clamps themselves actually have a dovetail profile on the bottom, so we just need to run a slot with a dovetail bit. These will slide right in, and that holds everything down. No T-track. Picked up this kit from Microjig. It actually comes with 2 clamps, a setup gauge, the router bit, and a bunch of parts for making jigs and things like that. I'll leave some links in the description for both of these if you want to check those out. After I decide where my slot's going to go, I set up the blade height using the jig that came with the kit. And then I'll just run about a 1/4 inch wide slot just to give a little bit of relief on the router bit so it's not doing all the work itself. All right, so that last little cut there, I just took a 1/2 inch straight bit and cut a relief in here so I can drop these in. Once the fence is on there, I won't be able to get in from the backside. And I went back and put a second clamping track in. I think this is gonna end up sitting right about here, so that'll give me one close to the blade and one further down if I need to use it for anything. With that in, I'm gonna clean these up, do a little sanding on the edges, and then get the tracks installed. All right, got those adjusted, a little bit of cleaning up here. Just took a file on the edge of this little piece that runs in the T-slot. It's kind of a pressed out part and had a little burr on it. It's catching in the slot here, but seems like it's running pretty smooth now. So we'll get put some double-sided tape on these and get everything stuck down where we want them. Then we'll put screws in it to finalize it. So for alignment, I've got my fence set over here. That should get us started relatively square. And I think I just want these back off the front edge a little bit, so I'm gonna line them up with these set screws. and just drop it down. Nice and easy. Make sure it stays on the fence. Tape is stuck, so we'll just back this out as far as we can to get some screws started in the backside, and that should keep us nice and square. Perfect. Our fence has been cooking in the clamps for most of the day, so go ahead and pull this out and get it ripped down to size. Just to make sure I actually ended up with a straight fence, and it looks pretty good. So one last thing I want to do, I want to put a little bit of a notch down here at the bottom, just a place for the sawdust to get into, so we're not getting our board up against sawdust and getting a little bit out of whack when we slide things against the fence. And then I want to put another dovetail in this so that I can slide my stop block in. So I'm just going to rip a little bit off the bottom here with the table saw, and then we'll head over to the router and put our dovetail in. So with our groove in there, now we have a place to put our stop block. And we're just gonna come in here, just like we did on the big one. I'll put a screw in this end. I'm gonna cut probably halfway through the board. That'll give me something to square off of, and then we can pivot this around. I can actually clamp this down, take it off, put a couple screws in it, run some test pieces, make sure everything's square, and then we'll lock it down. I'll start with it pretty well flush with the back edge here, which, since I squared everything up off the fence, should get me in the ballpark, but we'll square it off the blade and make sure before we get too crazy putting screws in it. All right. Now, make sure you're not on the carbide, because that can give you a false reading. And go to the body of the blade, because your teeth might be kicked one way or the other. I actually use my new hold down system to clamp my fence in place. All right, we'll get a couple more screws in the bottom of that, and that looks like it's gonna be pretty good. All right, with that fence square to the blade, initially, I'm gonna go ahead and put this forward fence on to hold the board together, because we're about to cut it in half. As always, remember, you don't want to put any screws where your blade's gonna come through, and in this case, I'm gonna do this with a straight cutting blade, and then I'm gonna lean it over to 45. That way we can use this either way. I can use it as a small cutoff, cross-cut sled, or I can use it for the bevels. see how we did. I don't know if that'll focus on that, but yeah, I'm gonna get much more square than that. So I can lock that down. Then we can cut our bevel, and I want to put a little safety piece on the back here. Now, once I get my bevel cut in here, I'll come back and put a couple more in there. All right, so this piece will drop out once I cut the straight run the whole way through, and that'll be out of the way. On the back side, you can see where it's coming through there. Just to make sure I don't put my hands in the way, I'm gonna glue a couple blocks on the back here, just like I did on the big sled. And that'll pretty much finish this up. I'll just sand up some of the edges, and then we can cut some miters and see how it works. All right, a little bit of CA glue, some activator. Drop this on there, and then what we need to do is make a stop block and test some pieces. Drill a hole in there. All right, that'll work. And that is a perfect miter. All right, that's gonna finish this up. I just gotta do a little bit of sanding on the edges here and get things smoothed out, and I think this thing's gonna work out pretty good. It's gonna come in handy on our next project when we start doing some mitered boxes. So if you have any questions, leave those down in the comments. If you haven't already, go hit that subscribe button for me, and as always, thanks for watching. See you on the next video. Leave the front fence off for now. Back fence, whichever way you wanna look at that. The in-feed fence. And we should be good. Then we can put the front fence on. Back fence. That fence. Whatever that one is. I don't know. Don't forget your earplugs. And clamp them to my 6.5 foot level while they dry. Acorns, damn it. Ah!